Good morning. I'm here at Perigord Retreats, where I've been for the last week, 10 days actually, with 7 wonderful students. And we've been traveling all around the countryside, painting incredible villages and scenes. But right here on the Perigord Retreats property is this fantastic lavender field. Just look at it. Early morning now, the bees are all waking up and it's just gorgeous. A few days ago, we came down here with the students and I did a lesson on linear perspective, and then we painted the lavender field to put that theory into practice. And then I thought, why don't I come down again this morning with Harrison behind the camera, one of our hosts, to paint it with you, and you can share the morning with me. So here's the scene that I painted, lavender going to the concrete cows. Harrison's too shy to come in front of the camera, so I'm going to get him to put in the description about the story behind the lavender, the story behind the concrete cows. But yeah, let's get started. I'm all set up here and we can paint this together. In the lavender field, we've got these 2 concrete cows. I'm going to get Harrison to explain to you a little bit about what the cows are all about. And they make a wonderful focal point. So we've got gorgeous light this morning and the bees are just starting and the focal point of the cows there in the distance. So I'm going to first put the cows in before I put the lavender field so that I know that they're in a good position for the focal point. And because they're concrete, they're not moving, which is awesome. So they're nice and easy to draw. So just starting with the one on the right hand side there, the colourful one, and putting her in gently in pencil. Nice fat belly. Cows have very rounded bellies. And a tail. And the other one with the head down. This is the white one on the left. And then once I've positioned those, I've got my composition just to fit around them. So I'm making the composition make sense around my focal point. So we've got wonderful linear perspective here. So let's put in the lavender fields. They're going to fan out as they come across. I'm going to keep this painting more of a sketch, an impression of the lavender fields. So I'm going to have a nice vignette type shape around here. So kind of pretty much the same thing as I would do in my sketchbook, but on a proper piece of paper. So I'm working on Fabriano cold press paper. It's 100% cotton. Fabriano Artistico, and this is a 8th or 16th sheet, I think, so 28 by 19 centimeters. And I'm not worrying about counting the number of rows. I'm just getting the perspective to look right to me. So let's put another row on this side. And then we've got a grass path giving us that lovely green as a contrast to the lavender, and then a row. Some rows start out here again, and then the same on the other side. Then standing back from my picture, just making sure that I'm happy with that composition. So I'm thinking this cow's head needs to come a bit more down. So she's eating the lavender. Do cows eat lavender? I'm not really sure. Oh well, this one is. Give her a fatter belly. and this one gazing off into the distance. And then we've got this lovely bush line at the back, which is super, super dark at the bottom, which is fantastic because it's going to give us a nice counter change of the dark against the light here of the cow. So we're going to have our focal point with the most contrast. So just blocking that in. It's only important for the composition. We don't have to worry about each individual tree. Just giving the tree line an interesting shape. So no sort of humps like you did when you were in kindergarten. Nice random shape. Absolutely gorgeous day. No clouds in the sky. It's going to be hot. Okay, that's my pencil drawing done. Time to pick up a brush. Here's my palette. So this is the travel palette that I take everywhere with me, and I've got my cool colors all along the top here, blues going through to greens, then my earth tones, my warm colors, and my going from yellow right through to the pink ones. And I've listed all these colors on my blog, on my website, so if you are interested in exactly what's on my palette, you can have a look there. But I'm not going to use everything that's on my palette. We've got a very harmonious scene here this morning with all the purples of the lavender going through to the greens of the grass and the greens at the bottom of the lavender. Lots of green in the background and the blue sky. And the only things that are really brightly colored are the cows. So even though I have all these colors on my palette, I'm not going to use all of them. So let's start with the lavender. No, I'm changing my mind. Let's start with the sky. Okay, so I've got my Escoda Versatile number 12, the biggest travel brush that they make, and I'm going to wet the whole sky just with clean water, giving it a nice shape. But remember, I'm going to not paint right to the tape. I'm going to make a vignette, so I'm just giving the sky a nice shape, and I'm painting right over the trees, but not over the lavender and not over the cows. And I want a nice consistency of water. It's still cool this morning, so it's not going to dry very, very fast, which is awesome. And I'm painting at a slight angle, maybe 30 degrees, which will help the paint run down. So careful shaping around the cows. Have a paper towel handy, so if you find you've gone over the cows and you didn't want that, you can just dry them off. And if you're working bigger than this, you should be using a bigger brush. So I'm thinking that's kind of a nice shape. And for the sky, I'm just going to use cobalt blue. Nice and simple, not much happening in the sky this morning. And I'm just going to drop it into the water. I'm not pushing it into the paper, I'm trying to put the paint inside that layer of water. And over the trees. And darker at the top than towards the horizon line. And again, just thinking about the shape I want to create for my painting. And right over the trees and around the cows. Just going to pick up that bead. I don't know if you can see it in the video because I'm painting at an angle. There's a bead that's formed along here. I'm just going to dry that. It'll be easier with the brush. I'm hoping you can hear the doves. They seem to have woken up. It sounds super lovely. Okay. And while we're waiting for that to dry, I'm going to paint in the lavender. And I found the trick with painting lavender is it's purple, but if you just used permanent violet or some sort of lavender color straight from your palette, it doesn't look particularly natural or interesting. So I am going to use permanent violet because that's what the purple that I have on my palette. But I'm going to mix it in with a little bit of a pink. I'm going to use quinacridone rose, just because I find that makes it look more natural. The flowers are are a range of colors. So we're going to use, for the light part of where the sun is catching, we're going to use permanent violet and quinacridone rose. And for the dark side, where it's catching the shadow, we're going to use thicker permanent violet. Okay. So just to my cobalt blue patch, mixing up some light permanent violet, and I'm going to add a little well of quinacridone rose, but you can use any purple and any pink. And the idea, in order to give our painting a sense of depth, is the further away we get from our focal point and from where I'm standing, which is here in the middle, the lighter and less detail we're going to have. So there's going to be lighter washes here and far less detail. And as we come towards the front, we're going to increase the density, the thickness of our paint. So this is going to be much, much darker here than it is out at the sides, and that will give us a sense of depth. So I've mixed it quite light just to get those rows of lavender, and I'm going to paint in the direction that the rows go. So starting out from here, doesn't matter if it bleeds into the sky because we're going to put the bushes on top anyway. So starting out from the side, paint in the direction that the rows go. So something a bit like that, and then add in a little bit of the pink. And moving to the next rows, painting in the direction that they go. And in this case, I can see some green in between as well, so I'm leaving quite a wide gap for the greens of the bushes, the leaves. Starting at the back, coming forward. So watching your perspective, I've got one beautiful one-point perspective here. And then while that's still wet, drop in a little bit of the pink just to keep it interesting. And then these ones out here. These ones on the outside, I think I'm going to leave pretty much like that. But these ones that are my main lead in, I want to make them much, much darker here in the foreground. So more paint. And as you come forward, more detail. Maybe a touch more pink as well. Why not? I decided I want one of them to be a little bit longer than the other ones. And you can see how wet I'm working. So there's lots of beading, giving me lots of time to work. Thinking this is a little bit light. Let's add a bit more there. Then right here in the foreground, really, really dark. And then while it's still wet, you can fill in the gaps with the green. So lavender green, I find it's easiest if you take some of that purple and you add a bit of green to it. Gives you that sort of dull bluey green that lavender bushes are. It's not as bright green as the grass. Just following your perspective, fill in the green in between. I've still got some arrays of pieces there. Oh. Just trying to look at it as a holistically and decide whether I've got a nice shape. Picturing it framed, because I'm incredibly egotistical. So I'm thinking, oh, what's it going to look like when it's framed? Okay. I'm already also planning where I'm going to sign it. That's pretty brave. Okay. So I'm just watching. Maybe pick up these beads. Water at the bottom. Just dry, clean your brush, dry it on your paper towel. And with that we call it a thirsty brush, just pick up the little beads that are along the bottom. still working on the idea that it's already got a sense of depth going from dark through to light, but now what we want to do is add a whole lot more detail here in the front. So I think I'll change to a little bit smaller brush. So this is a Escoda Perla number 8, still also the travel brush version. And let's indicate that there's some lavender, individual lavender flowers here. And if your painting's dried, it doesn't matter. You can do this when it's dried. Mine just happens to be wet still. So I've got early morning, it's not too hot. So I'm going to get some lovely soft marks. Less marks as you go back, and still thinking about your perspective. Okay, enough with the lavender. We're going to come back and add more detail later when it's dry. Okay, just having a look, checking that this is dry. I think I'm going to pause now for just 5 minutes and let that dry completely so that I can come in and put the bushes to frame around the cows and the lavender. Right, so my sky is pretty much dry now, and you can tell, but if you touch it and it feels sort of body temperature, then you know that it's dry. If it's still damp and you're concerned, probably get a good idea to get the hairdryer out and to dry it properly. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the trees from left to right. And there's 2 things that are in the back of my mind. One, I want to make sure that I get the sunlight coming from the right side, which is the correct side today is the right side. And I'm going to paint the whole strip of trees in the color that the trees are of their sunlit side, all the way across. And I'm going to use this big brush and then change to a smaller one to do some teasing in along the bottom to give the lavenders a nice shape, and we call that negative painting. So we're not painting the lavenders, we're creating the lavenders by painting behind them, the bushes, to create an interesting shape. So this is a Escoda it's a Escoda Perla number 2, so it's quite a small one. Okay, so mix up a light green. So this is green gold. So a nice bright green, very summery. And following the tree line that you've created, something nice and random. Starting from the left to the right, and I'm holding the brush quite far back so that I don't have too much control, giving that tree line a nice shape. And as Bob Ross would say, I'm leaving some gaps for the birds to fly through. And because I painted the sky entirely over, it's the sky color that's coming through. Working quite fast so I can get all the way to the other side while this side's still wet. Big brush. Careful shaping around the cows and around the lavender. Quite a big area, so you'll notice that I didn't mix nearly enough paint, so you can do better than that. Mix up a bigger pool of paint. So this is the color where the sun is catching the trees. And then while that's still wet, with my smaller brush, I can do the careful carving in around the cows. Have your paper towel handy, so if the paint goes somewhere you didn't want it to, you can just quickly dab it up. And then giving the lavender, cut in quite hard so that you can give the lavender some interesting shape. So this is called negative painting. too much of a bead there. Each lavender row has that lovely rounded shape. So let's put that in. Okay. And then while it's still wet, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with a mid-tone of green. So I want the bushes to be rounded, so I'm going to use this one here, which is sap green. And I'm thinking about the sun coming from this side. So all on the left-hand sides, I'm going to drop in, while it's still wet, the sap green. So along the left-hand sides, imagining each bush having a rounded shape, but like a wobbly lollipop, I suppose. And along the bottoms. Left-hand sides and along the bottoms. And again, to the smaller brush to tease that in. So we're already getting quite a lot of form, but we can always exaggerate that. I'm just going to pick up those beads. You can wait for them to dry on their own, or carry on working, but because I'm painting outside and I'm watching the light changing quite fast and making sure I want to capture that, I do want to work a little bit faster. I'm not a little bit impatient. Oh, there's a bee. That's so cute. Okay. I want to work a little bit faster than I would do in the studio. So we had the light tone, we've got the mid-tone, and now I'm going to go really, really dark, particularly around my cows, because they're my focal point, and that's where I want the most contrast. So again, light is from this side, so we're only going to be dropping that in on the left-hand side. I'm going to use indigo. My indigo is on the green side, and I love it as a combination with sap green to make it super, super dark. Can you see how dark that is? So just on the bottoms and the left-hand side, and really, really dark. I'm going to come in with a small brush there. Mostly around my focal point. So, very thick paint now. So with a tiny brush, define the cow. Now I've lost, this cow's got an ear on that side, and I've painted over it, but not to worry, because we can use a white pen to get that ear back later. And then that idea of the negative painting, giving the lavender some of their spikes. Now if your trees are dry, then it's time to stop, but mine still have, they're still a little bit damp, so it gives me the opportunity to add in just maybe 1 or 2 extra colors to make them look a bit natural. So some sort of indication that not all the leaves are green. This is a little bit of quinacridone gold, but any raw sienna or even a burnt sienna, just to drop it in to make it a little bit more interesting. If yours is dry, don't do this. You can get really bad cauliflowers, so you can just leave this out. And I think that we're done there. My bushes are not quite dry, but that's okay, because I think it'll be quite nice if when I paint the grass that it blends in a little bit there, so giving us again that sense of distance, that things far away from us don't have much detail. But the lavenders are all dry, and immediately you can see we've got already, without any details, a sense of depth. So much darker here, a little bit more detail happening, and much lighter towards the back. Okay, so let's paint in the grass. And nice bright summer green. So I think I'm just going to use sap green on its own. Just watch your perspective again, and one stroke from the back to the front. And again, I'm thinking about the shape that I've created. And I think I'll leave that bush to stand out on its own. And then on this side. So not too much happening. We want the main focus to be on the lavender, not on the grass pathways. So I don't want to paint the cows now while the bushes are wet, but I can put in all the details of the lavender. And so I'm going to use some quite free dots and dashes, sort of dots of color, mostly around the foreground here, and a little bit less as we go towards the back, but still trying to emphasize that the shadow is on the left hand side of each of the bushes, or each of the rows of bushes of the lavender. So this is that permanent violet again. Just some free marks. This is that perla brush again. It's quite springy, so it should give me some nice loose marks. On the left hand sides of each of the rows. A lot more detail here. Oh, sorry, I've got a frog in my throat now. Excuse me. Is that going to come out badly? Sorry if I deafened you there. Okay, it's just on the left hand sides. Much more detail, bigger strokes here in the front and going through to the back. This is a bit of meditation for sure. It's all sort of coming together now. And then for these ones on the side, just a little indication that there's some shadow on the left hand side. Not too much detail. Oh, left hand side. Nearly did it on the right there. And then just to keep it natural, a little bit with that pink as well. And yes, I know lavender is not this pink, but I promise you it's going to make sense. So that's loose and big marks. Change to your tiniest brush. Very thick paint. And let's really define these front ones. So, you know, the lavender spikes, the flowers are quite spiky. So let's put in some nice spikes here at the front. Now we're after the idea of a sketch, so even though you've got your tiny brush in your hand, don't get drawn into doing too much detail. Try and keep it free. Don't suddenly think, oh, you want to draw every single, every single bush and every single flower. Let's keep with that free idea. So it seems like it's a bit too much in the foreground, so let's just continue that a little bit. And then some pink ones as well. think it'd be nice to have some escaping entirely from my rose. Yeah, something like that. I'm going to pick up this bead here. I don't know if you noticed, because the grass is wet, that when I painted the purple it bled into the grass, and I absolutely love that, because it means that when I put the shadows, which are the bushes are casting on this left hand side, it's going to have a bit of a purple glow, so reflecting the purple of the lavender onto the grass. So that kind of thing, don't fight it, it makes it look nice and natural. Alright, tiny brush, let's do the cows. So I'm going to start with the brightly coloured one. So lots of stripes, maybe a bit of orange. The orange is awesome because it's a nice complementary colour to everything that's happening. Just following the shape of the cow around her belly, and a bit on her face. And then this cow's got blocks of colour. And you can have great fun. There's so much colour in these cows. So you can really go all out with some yellow. Super bright green. I'll wait for that to dry and then I'll come in with some blue ones. What has she got on her head? She's got the bright green over here. Now it's time to do all of the shadows. So we've got shadows. I'm thinking I'm going to go, once the cows are dry, I'm going to go even darker here behind them. So super dark shadow there behind them. And the lavender bushes are casting a shadow here on the left hand sides of each of the rows. And make sure that when you do the shadows that you follow the perspective as well. So it's still the 1 point perspective, so it's going to be narrower here and get wider towards the outside. Okay, so just that mix of greens on my palette. And let's drop in the shadows. Nice and rough because the lavender bushes have their spikes sticking up and getting wider and wider as we come to the front. And on this side as well. Can't see as much shadow from where I'm standing on this side. I'm just dropping a little bit of dark right underneath the bushes as well, so that's quite a lot darker closer to the bush than it is when it fans out. And then a little bit of indication of the dark greenery also in the between the bushes inside the rows. So we've got a relatively simple scene, but there's still, it doesn't mean that you should rush it. Still concentrating on the details. I'm thinking, now that I stand back from it, I'm thinking there could be some darker indications of the lavender here. Kind of what I did here. I like that. So let's do some darker lavender there. It's a good idea to stand back at this stage and just see if it needs anything extra. Okay, my cow's almost dry. So with this brush, let's go really dark behind them. This is where you need to get a bit brave. So I know it's got a hard edge because it's dried, but I'm going to soften that in a moment. So block in your darks in a nice, interesting shape. Then wet your brush, dry it on your paper towel, and just soften that so that it blends in some places. So nice and dark around the cows and softened in just some other places. And then I'm thinking it could be a little bit darker under the belly here. And if you've lost the shapes of your cows, you can reshape them at this point. So I've made this one a little bit fatter than she was in my pencil drawing, and I feel like that's much better. And then just because we don't want all of that dark just to be all in one place, let's just put a little bit elsewhere, just for consistency. So pop in some dark, clean and dry your brush and just soften it. Don't overdo this. We want most of it to be here in the focal point. Some pink here. I'm actually just fiddling because I'm waiting for the the cows and the greenery to dry so that I can put the shadows on them. And I'm terrible like most people. Once I got a brush in my hand, I can't put it down. I probably should. Okay. So I'm going to let that dry completely. There's just the shadows to put on the left hand side and underneath the bellies of the cows. And then we're going to pick up a pen just to redefine the shape of them. With my tiny brush now, I'm just going to define the shadow on the left hand side of the cows and along their bellies. So I'm thinking, let's make a grey. So take our purple. There we go. That worked perfectly. So take the purple and add it to the green, and we've got a bluish grey. Tiny brush, left hand side, and down the neck. And it should make your cow far more three-dimensional. And then the same for this one. On the left hand side and around her belly. And that's the painting part done. All that's left to do is to define the cows a little bit with some pen work. I'm just going to soften those edges, cows around it, and then to sign it. So I'm working with a fountain pen, so that means that I can work now with the pen while the painting is still wet. But if you're working with a felt tip pen, make sure that it's completely dry, because if you work with a felt tip pen onto something wet, it is going to ruin it. I'm just going to put my palette down out of the way and show you my pens. I've got 3 different pens here. This is a Lamy Safari with an extra fine nib and dark brown ink, so it's not black ink. And this is a white gel pen and a white felt tip marker with acrylic ink inside it. We'll just shake that one up. So starting with the brown one, I'm just going to put it on the shadow side. So only on the shadow sides. And this is your chance to redefine your cows if you've lost the detail a bit. There's an ear there, which I lost. It's almost like if somebody looked at your painting, they couldn't tell that you'd put any pen on. So we don't want to overdo it. Pretty much that's it. And then the white one, if the top of your cows has become a little bit wobbly, you can just redefine that light. Then I lost that ear, so I can put the ear in. And this one as well, the ear's a bit of a strange shape. Just sharpening up that edge there and putting the tail in. And then with this one, shake it with the lid on, because I have shooken it, I don't know if that's a word, with the lid off and just splattered paint everywhere. And I just want to put a few little dots here to make the look, the lavender's, early morning light, the lavender's a little bit shiny. So just to create a little bit of shine, mostly in the foreground. And again, if you do take it through to the back, just watch your perspective. And you know, you can use that along the top here as well. Yeah, I don't want to overdo it. Finally, time to sign it. So choose the side that sort of makes sense. And I invariably can't sign my name straight, so I do draw a little line for it. And just sign it either in paint with a tiny, tiny, tiny brush, or with pen. If you haven't used any pen, then you should probably sign it in paint. Okay, this is where I pause so that I don't spell my name wrong. Okay. And we're done. Once we remove the tape, it's going to look so much better, but there we go. Lavender field at Perigord Retreats. Beautiful morning. What could be better? Oh yes, what could be better is that I'm going to go inside now for breakfast and see what Harrison and Cattell have cooked up for us.